SS Hauptsturmführer Werner Lindner peers through the gap in the stone wall and tries to locate the sound that didn't make one. It is August 12th, 1944. Outside the village of Troon, in the collapsing corridor west of Falaise, France, the morning smells of diesel smoke and something sweeter, something he learned to identify in the marshes of Damiansk and does not want to name here. His adjutant is 40 meters behind him, lying face up in the lane where he fell 23 minutes ago. One round, no warning, no second shot. Lindner is 32 years old. He commands a company of the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf, the Death's Head, one of the most combat-decorated formations in the entire Wehrmacht. These men have endured Soviet artillery concentrations that vibrated the fillings from their teeth, and they have fought in temperatures that cracked the bolt mechanisms of their rifles at -30. They do not scare. That is an institutional fact. It is practically a theology. They are scared now. 3 officers in the battalion have been killed in the past 7 hours. Not in an assault, not while directing armor, not while rallying men under fire. They were killed while standing, while thinking, while existing above ground level. The battalion commander died stepping out of a cellar doorway. The signals officer died reaching for a field telephone. Lindner's adjutant died pointing at a map. Someone is reading the patterns. Someone is learning in real time what each pattern means. Lindner scans the tree line north, the ruined farmhouse east, the drainage ditch cutting diagonally across the field at 310 meters, 270 meters, 390 meters, and sees nothing, hears nothing. The shooter has not fired in 34 minutes. That silence is somehow more paralyzing than the firing was. By nightfall, SS Hauptsturmführer Werner Lindner will have lost 6 officers from a single American 2-man team positioned in a drainage culvert he never thought to check. And everything the Totenkopf division believed about battlefield dominance will be proven catastrophically, methodically wrong. This is not a story about marksmanship. This is the forensic breakdown of how an institution that dismissed a skill for 3 consecutive years suddenly weaponized it into a command-killing machine, and how that machine dismantled one of Germany's most feared divisions, one officer at a time. Part 1. The Humiliation. In December 1941, the United States Army entered World War II as, while arguably, the worst-equipped sniper force of any major combatant nation. That is not editorial judgment. That is the conclusion of the Army Ground Force's own post-war capability assessment, conducted between 1946 and 1948, which found that at the time of the Pearl Harbor attack, the entire U.S. Army could field fewer than 250 sniper-qualified riflemen across all theaters and training commands combined. Germany's Wehrmacht, by that same date, had deployed an estimated 76,800 trained marksmen fitted with optic-mounted rifles, approximately 1 for every 12 German infantrymen at the front. The imbalance was not a gap. It was a canyon with no bridge. How did the most industrially powerful nation on earth build a military that all but abandoned one of infantry warfare's oldest force multipliers? The answer is simultaneously bureaucratic, cultural, and catastrophically self-reinforcing. The cultural argument came first, and it came from the top. Brigadier General Leslie McNair, the chief architect of Army Ground Forces training policy from 1940 onward, had concluded by the late 1930s that the precision bolt-action rifle was an artifact of frontier combat, fundamentally incompatible with the high-tempo mechanized warfare he anticipated. McNair articulated this view with characteristic bluntness in a 1940 memorandum to the Infantry Board. Sniping was a specialist function that absorbs training resources disproportionate to its battlefield contribution. The Army's future, McNair believed, lived in volume of fire, semi-automatic rifles, machine guns, massed artillery, not in a single man lying in a ditch waiting for a shot. He had the rank to make his wrongness official policy, and so it became official policy. The bureaucratic consequence arrived in layers. The M1903A4, a Springfield bolt-action fitted with a Weaver 330C telescopic sight capable of delivering first-round hits at 600 meters in trained hands, was approved for production in 1942. The Army ordered 28,365 of them. This sounds like preparation until you discover that formal training doctrine for the weapon was not finalized until late 1943, and that by June 6, 1944, significant numbers of these rifles had been issued to men who had received nothing beyond basic range familiarization. A precision weapon without a precision doctrine is an expensive stick with glass on it. The battlefield reckoning arrived in Tunisia in the winter and spring of 1943, or during the American Army's first sustained ground combat of the war. German snipers, many of them Eastern Front veterans, equipped with scoped carabiner, 98K rifles, and months of institutional training, specifically in officer targeting doctrine, systematically eliminated American command elements at ranges between 400 and 800 meters, a band where American return fire was functionally useless. In the first 12 weeks of the Tunisia campaign, the 1st Infantry Division's officer casualty rate ran 34% above the enlisted rate, a statistical signature with only one plausible explanation. Major General Terry Allen, commanding the Big Red One, raised the alarm in March 1943 with a formal after-action assessment that reached Army Ground Forces headquarters with the clarity of a well-aimed round. The enemy, Allen wrote, demonstrates consistent ability to neutralize command elements at ranges beyond which our infantry can effectively respond. Our counter-sniper capability is negligible. This is not a deficiency in the courage of our men. It is a deficiency in their training. McNair read the report. His office filed it. Nothing changed yet. The German marksman who most precisely embodied America's institutional failure has no official name in any American record. He appears in a Signals Intercept summary dated April 9, 1943, as Subject Unknown, German Sniper, Sector 14 Bravo, a man who killed or wounded 9 American officers across 14 days near Jebel Berda in northern Tunisia, working from positions so well prepared that a full infantry sweep of the area after his apparent withdrawal found no shell casings, no disturbed ground, and no indication that any human being had been there. American soldiers named him the Ghost of 14 Bravo. His real name, his unit, and his fate remain unknown. He was not a ghost. He was a professional operating within a doctrine his army had spent a decade developing, a doctrine the American Army had spent the same decade dismissing. Put yourself inside a U.S. Army command post in Tunisia, reading the casualty reports. Your officers are dying. You know from the range, from the single shots, from the absolute absence of response fire, who is killing them and approximately how. And you know, with the specific nausea of institutional failure, that your own army built the weapon to fight back and then neglected to build the thinking to use it. What the ghost of 14 Bravo revealed was not simply the absence of American snipers, and he revealed the absence of American thinking about snipers, the conceptual void at the center of an army that had mistaken firepower for comprehensiveness. Part 2. The Turn. 17 days after General Allen's March 1943 report landed at Army Ground Forces Headquarters, an officer named Captain Gilbert L. McCardle walked into a converted barracks room at Fort Benning, Georgia, carrying a 47-page training syllabus borrowed from the British Army's Lovat Scouts, and began, without waiting for permission from above, to rewrite the American Army's relationship with precision killing. McCardle was 33. Before the war, he had spent 4 years as a surveying technician for the Tennessee Valley Authority, mapping terrain so rugged and remote in the Appalachian backcountry that acquiring a reliable sighting angle sometimes required 3 days of positioning work before you ever put glass to your eye. He understood patience the way most men understand hunger, as a physical condition, not a virtue. The Army had assigned him to small arms instruction almost by clerical accident, a high marksmanship test score, a bureaucratic notation reading sniper instructor material, and a personnel system that had not yet built the infrastructure to know what that notation meant. McCardle would build the infrastructure himself. The Lovat Scouts document he'd borrowed articulated a philosophy entirely foreign to American infantry doctrine. Sniping was not about shooting. It was about information, patience, and the systematic destruction of the enemy's command architecture. You did not fire at soldiers. You fired at the concept of command. McCardle adapted this framework across 11 weeks of curriculum work, not waiting for doctrine to be formalized, simply constructing a finished product and presenting it to his superiors as accomplished fact. The sniper training course at Fort Benning launched October 4th, 1943, with its first class of 32 students. All combat veterans, all volunteers, none of them famous. McNair had dismissed the specialty. His successor, as head of Army Ground Forces Training Policy after McNair's death in Normandy in July 1944, Lieutenant General Ben Lear reversed course with a single directive: expand sniper training capacity by a factor of 4 within 90 days and integrate sniper intelligence output directly into corps-level targeting cycles. The contrast in doctrine was expressed in one tactical decision. McNair's policy placed snipers under infantry company commanders as individual marksmen. Lear's revision placed them under corps intelligence sections as systematic collection assets. Same rifle, entirely different weapon. The results of McCardle's first classes arrived in the European theater 6 months later. In the first 19 days of the Normandy campaign, documented American sniper-attributed officer kills against German forces in the 1st Army sector ran at a rate 4.3 times higher than in the comparable period following the North Africa landings. a divergence too large to attribute to anything except a systemic transformation in capability. One engagement previewed the machine. On June 23, 1944, Corporal Russell Jennings and his spotter, Private First Class Lee Carruthers, in a Normandy hedgerow hide that had taken them 11 hours to construct, eliminated a German battalion fire coordination team, 3 men, including an artillery observer, in 23 minutes. 4 rounds fired. 6 hours of suppressed German artillery in that sector. But that engagement was a preview, not the performance. Because what no one had yet seen, what the Totenkopf division would discover at hideous cost in the killing ground west of Falaise, was what this capability looked like when it was organized, systematized, and deployed at scale across an entire American corps front. Part 3. The Pillars. 4 pillars built the machine. 4 pillars that the Totenkopf's commanders encountered in sequence, each one more devastating than the last, each one answering a different question about what made an SS officer's continued existence on this battlefield statistically improbable. Pillar 1. The architecture of priority. Officers first, always, without exception. Under American infantry doctrine, as written in 1942, a sniper's priority target was the nearest visible enemy. Under the revised doctrine finalized by McCardle's team in late 1943, a sniper's priority target was the highest-ranking identifiable officer within engagement range, regardless of distance, regardless of exposure time, regardless of competing targets. This single inversion, nearest to highest, multiplied the tactical value of a single shot by an estimated factor of 8 to 12, per the Army Ground Force's own post-war analysis of command disruption rates per confirmed kill. Identifying a German officer at 400 meters through a 4-power scope required a 6-page section of the training manual that American snipers were required to commit to memory. The indicators: officers carried map cases, rectangular, leather, worn on a long shoulder strap, creating a distinctive silhouette break from the body. Officers used hand signals to coordinate movement. Officers oriented their faces toward the men they commanded rather than toward the threat. Officers reached for field telephones rather than weapons when firing began. Officers wore collar insignia, readable through a quality optic in decent light, that identified rank with precision. This was not observation training dressed up as marksmanship. It was the conversion of a rifleman into a command hunting specialist, and, crucially, it was an adversarial application of the German military's own Auftragstaktik, the mission command doctrine that devolved decision authority deep into the officer corps. Auftragstaktik worked because officers thought and decided independently. Remove the officers, and the decisions died with them. McCardle's team had read the doctrine they were dismantling. Corporal Elmer Whitmore, 22 years old. McCreary County, Kentucky, a county whose primary industry was coal extraction, where his father and grandfather had both worked as mine surveyors, and where Elmer had spent his adolescence learning to distinguish a timber post from a human silhouette in low light across distances his supervisors measured in surveyors' chains. He enlisted in February 1943. He attended McCardle's 3rd training class at Fort Benning in January 1944. Whitmore was not physically extraordinary. He weighed 157 pounds. His visual acuity tested at 20/13, sharper than average, not exceptional. What was exceptional, documented in training records and later in unit after-action reports, was his habit of making a small penciled notation beside each target description in his field notes, not just range and wind, but the officer's inferred rank, inferred function, and the estimated cascade of organizational disruption his elimination would cause to the unit's command cycle. He was not shooting men. He was dismantling organizations. The distinction was everything. In 31 days of active operations between June 24th and July 24th, 1944, in Normandy and the approach to Falaise, Whitmore's documented confirmation record showed 23 kills, of which 18 per post-battle identification against captured German casualty rosters were officers or senior non-commissioned officers. His section sergeant, reviewing these numbers, called it the most systematic performance he had witnessed. The report was filed. The file was filed. Elmer Whitmore returned to McCreary County in 1946, went to work as a land surveyor for a timber company, and never mentioned to anyone what he had done in France. He died in 1991 at a veteran's home in Corbin, Kentucky, survived by 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren, none of whom knew his confirmed kill count. He never received the Distinguished Service Cross that the after-action documentation plainly suggests he merited. The paperwork was either lost or never submitted. He appears in no published history of American sniper operations. The injustice of that is not simply that he was forgotten. It is that the army he served classified what he did as miscellaneous sniper operations, Normandy sector. Miscellaneous. SS Standartenführer Helmuth Becker, commanding the 3rd SS Panzer Regiment Totenkopf in 1944, described the experience in post-war testimony gathered by American military historians. We began to understand that the losses were not random. They were selected. The men dying were not simply men in the wrong place. They were specifically the men we could least afford to lose. Our battalion commanders began adopting the posture of enlisted soldiers, removing insignia, carrying rifles instead of map cases, avoiding the telephone. This was not cowardice. It was the rational response to an enemy who had learned to read us. He paused in the testimony, then added one sentence that the interviewing historian underlined twice in the transcript. They had turned our own doctrine against us. Auftragstaktik functions because the officer thinks and decides. Remove the officer, and the decision dies with him. Identifying officers was only the beginning. A sniper who can identify a target is merely a man with a rifle. Reaching that target, reliably, across the chaotic acoustic landscape of a tactical withdrawal, in terrain that compressed sight lines and multiplied concealment, required a second innovation that transformed the lone marksman into something structurally different. Pillar 2. The paired architecture. Shooter and spotter as a single organism. A lone sniper operating in Normandy's hedgerow terrain could expect to deliver an accurate first-round hit at 400 meters approximately 67% of the time, under real field conditions, per Fort Benning range data collected across 4,200 documented trials. A paired team, one shooter, one spotter working a separate optic, raised that figure to 84% through real-time wind estimation, range correction, and the elimination of the shooter's breathing-induced wobble during the trigger sequence. The difference between 67% and 84% sounds modest until you multiply it across 847 documented American sniper engagements in the Normandy campaign, at which point the difference translates to approximately 143 additional first-round kills. Our first-round kills mattered disproportionately. A second shot revealed position. A single, unattributed crack from an unseen direction was a wound the enemy could not localize. The pairing worked because it divided cognitive tasks the human nervous system cannot perform simultaneously. The shooter, at the moment of triggering, experienced a physiological narrowing of awareness. The eye at the scope, the crosshair centered, the breath arrested, the world collapsing to a 4-power circle. The spotter, oriented with a slightly wider field at a separate instrument, read the environment the shooter could no longer perceive. Mirage patterns indicating wind velocity at mid-range, the target's micro-movements, the shifting of shadows, signaling a change in illumination angle. After each shot, the spotter called the strike in cardinal terms while the shooter had already begun cycling for a follow-up. 2 minds, 1 system, 1 outcome. Private First Class Earl Prentice, 20 years old, Decatur, Illinois. Before the war, Earl had worked as an apprentice lens grinder at the Illinois Optical Company, spending 8-hour shifts scrutinizing glass surfaces for micro-imperfections under magnification, his eye trained to detect deviation at a scale most human beings never learn to perceive. His capability was professionally developed before he ever held a rifle. Prentice served as a spotter, not a shooter. He fired his weapon, by his own later account, fewer than 40 times across the entire European campaign. He never pulled the trigger during an engagement. He was the man who made certain the trigger was pulled at exactly the correct millisecond, with exactly the correct compensation. In the hedgerows south of Caen, on July 11th, 1944, with the smell of cordite and turned earth hanging flat in the humid air, Prentice directed a 3-shot correction sequence that enabled his shooting partner to eliminate a German mortar observation team at 512 meters. A shot the shooter, working alone, would statistically have missed on the first round. The mortar battery those observers were directing had been pinning an American company for 4 hours. After the observation team went down, the mortars went quiet. The company moved. The ledger doesn't record Earl Prentice's name beside that entry. He came home to Decatur in 1945 and returned to the optical company, eventually becoming shift supervisor, for a position he held until 1979. He told his son once, during a 1961 fishing trip on Lake Decatur, that his wartime job had been looking at things. His son assumed he was being modest. He was being forensically precise. A captured document from the 3rd SS Division's intelligence section, dated August 3, 1944, contains this assessment. American sniper pairs demonstrate a level of operational coordination previously observed only in our own Scharfschützen teams. The combined practice of wide field observation and precision engagement is systematic and sophisticated. Officers moving in daylight must assume continuous observation. Identifying officers. Reaching them reliably with 2 minds rather than 1. But the paired team was only dangerous if it couldn't be found. and in the dense, close terrain of Normandy. "I'm finding the team before it found you," was the question the Totenkopf soldiers could not answer, because the team had been trained with painstaking specificity to functionally not exist. Pillar 3. The Science of Disappearance. Hide construction as military discipline. The revised American Sniper curriculum devoted 24 hours of its 200-hour course specifically to hide site construction, more time than it devoted to advanced ballistics. A competent sniper pair required, on average, 8 to 14 hours to prepare a position from which they could operate for 24 to 72 continuous hours. That investment, more than half a day of labor, to create 3 days of access, generated what analysts later termed a position multiplier effect. A two-man team in a correctly constructed hide functioned, tactically, as if it did not exist until the precise moment it chose to function. The methodology drew from 3 sources simultaneously: British fieldcraft doctrine, American waterfowl hunting practice, which had independently generated sophisticated blinds designed to deceive animals with exceptional peripheral detection, and the formal study of optical breakup, the use of pattern, texture, and color variation to defeat the human visual cortex's tendency to register linear forms against irregular backgrounds. A hide was not a whole. A hide was the careful reconstruction of the surrounding landscape in miniature, built from the landscape's own materials, approached from the enemy's sightline outward rather than from the occupant's perspective inward. The discipline that separated trained men from intuitive ones was this: all construction material was sourced from within 15 meters of the hide site itself. A pine branch cut 40 meters away smells different from the undergrowth directly around the position. German Shepherd security dogs, deployed extensively by Waffen-SS formations for perimeter sweeps, could detect olfactory discontinuity at ranges exceeding 200 meters. Locally sourced materials provided scent continuity with the terrain. This was not intuitive. It required instruction. Technical Sergeant Ralph Conover, 31 years old, Marquette, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where he had spent 15 years as a fishing guide on the Presque Isle and Dead Rivers, as building duck blinds and deer, stands that had to deceive not merely the target animal, but every predator in the ecosystem, including wolves capable of detecting human scent at distances measured in quarter miles. He could construct a hide from a standing start that, at 6 feet's distance, his own wife could not identify as man-made. He knew this because he'd demonstrated it once on a dare, and she'd walked past it twice. Conover did not come through McArdle's course as a student. He arrived as an instructor, recruited after a Fort Benning evaluator witnessed him demonstrate a position during a 1943 training visit to a Michigan facility. Conover taught 4 sniper courses between October 1943 and March 1944. He certified 189 sniper pairs. He never deployed to combat in Europe. In April 1944, a misfired blank cartridge during a training exercise cost him the vision in his right eye, ending his operational eligibility. He spent the remainder of the war teaching map reading at a base in Georgia. He died in 1977. His obituary in the Marquette Mining Journal identified him as a fishing guide and U.S. Army veteran. It did not mention the 189 men he trained. It did not mention that a methodology he helped formalize appeared in captured German intelligence documents as a persistent tactical threat of the First Order. He taught men to disappear, and then history disappeared him. SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Bernecker of Totenkopf's Reconnaissance Battalion in post-war testimony. We swept areas where acoustic analysis confirmed a shot had originated. We found nothing, not casings, not disturbed earth, not a compressed blade of grass. My men began speaking of phantoms. I told them they were not fighting phantoms. I told them they were fighting professionals. I am not certain which answer frightened them more. The hide protected the team. The priority doctrine directed the shot. The paired system made the shot reliable. But three pillars operating in isolation produced three separate engagements. What the American command had begun implementing, with consequences the Totenkopf would feel from Falaise to the Reich's border, was the integration of all three pillars into a single learning system that fed on its own results. Pillar 4, the ledger, after action. Intelligence as a living weapon under revised American practice. Each confirmed sniper kill was documented within 24 hours with 11 specific data points. Unit identification from uniform and insignia, estimated rank, time of engagement, shooter position, rounds expended, weather conditions, corrected distance, estimated range, enemy unit response, the name of the eliminated officer, when determinable from captured documents or prisoner interrogation, and the cascading organizational effect on the target unit. This documentation was collated at corps level into what soldiers informally called the ledger, a running organizational chart of German command casualties by formation, cross-referenced against unit order of battle. By August 1944, First Army's Sniper Intelligence Section was updating the document daily. The ledger did something that individual sharpshooting could never accomplish. It revealed behavioral patterns in German officer conduct that could be systematically exploited across the entire corps front. It showed, for instance, that Waffen-SS officers disproportionately used mid-morning hours for map coordination in buildings with second-story windows, a habit inherited from years of Eastern Front operations where the threat arrived from forward positions, not from concealed marksmen in rear terrain. American sniper pairs began orienting their hides toward the second-story windows of farmhouses in newly occupied German territory, rather than toward obvious fighting positions. The ledger told them where to wait. The ledger made patience productive. Staff Sergeant Thomas Kiefer, 27 years old, Cincinnati, Ohio. Before the war, Thomas had worked as a statistical analyst for the Cincinnati Times-Star, are building subscriber databases from public records data, coding structured information that other people considered too granular to be worth the labor. He had spent 3 years learning to build inference from patterns rather than from individual data points. The Army assigned him to Signals Intelligence as a senior clerk. A First Army intelligence officer discovered in late 1943 that Kiefer's specific capability, constructing predictive models from accumulated microdata, was precisely what the sniper intelligence function required and had not yet found. Kiefer never fired a sniper rifle in combat. He was present at the August 1944 Falaise engagements in a forward intelligence tent, updating the ledger in pencil as radio reports arrived from sniper pairs in the field. Triangulating position reports are cross-referencing German unit identifications against order of battle records, building a real-time picture of which Totenkopf command echelons had been degraded and which remained intact. His weapon was a pencil and a filing system. Per the assessment of 1st Army Sniper Section Chief, written in 1945, the ledger he maintained was the single most valuable intelligence tool in the precision engagement program. Thomas Kiefer returned to Cincinnati in 1945 and spent 26 years as circulation manager of the Times-Star. He never sought recognition. He never spoke publicly about the ledger. He appears in the record because the Army required signatures on documents, and his is on hundreds of them. He built the nervous system of a killing operation, and history classified him as a clerk. SS Oberfuhrer Max Simon, in reviewing his division's officer casualty patterns in late July 1944, wrote in his command diary, "The losses are not random. They form a sequence. Someone is reading us and using each engagement to refine the next. This is not a sniper campaign. This is a systematic research program, conducted with our officers as its subject matter." He was exactly correct. Part 4. The Machine at Full Power. The Killing Ground West of Falaise, August 1944. The Falaise Pocket, that ragged, burning corridor through which the remnants of German Army Group B attempted to extract themselves from Allied encirclement, is documented comprehensively in operational histories that focus correctly on the air power, artillery concentration, and armored pincer that sealed it. Yet what those histories rarely capture is the texture of what happened at ground level, in the hedgerows and sunken lanes and shattered farmsteads, where American sniper pairs operated with a precision that Totenkopf survivors would describe 30 years later, in language that had not fully shed its dread. The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf entered the Falaise corridor between August 17th and August 21st, 1944. By this point, the division had already absorbed catastrophic losses around Mortain and the subsequent Allied breakout. Its armored strength had fallen from approximately 131 operational tanks to fewer than 43. Its infantry regiments were functioning at between 49% and 67% of authorized strength. These are the conditions under which command architecture becomes most critical, not least when a unit is under strength. The judgment and coordination of its surviving officers becomes proportionally more valuable, not less. American sniper pairs had been positioned ahead of the Totenkopf's withdrawal route for 72 hours before the division's main elements arrived. 9:14 a.m., August 18, 1944. Ferme des Ormes, a farmstead 6 kilometers northwest of Troon, France. SS Sturmbannführer Gerhard Weiss, commanding the Totenkopf's 6th SS Panzergrenadier Regiment, steps into the farmyard to orient himself against a map spread on the hood of a Kübelwagen. He has removed his collar insignia. He has left his map case inside the farmhouse. He carries his map in his hands, rather than displaying it on a board. And these are the adaptations, learned from bitter experience and distributed through the division's informal knowledge network over the previous 3 weeks, that he believes will reduce his signature as a command priority target. He has made 3 identifiable errors. He does not know this yet. The first error? He is oriented northeast, facing the established American front line. He has not considered that the threat might be positioned from behind his direction of travel. From the stone wall, 337 meters to his south, where Corporal Elmer Whitmore and Private First Class Jard Hastings have been lying in a hide site constructed the previous night, camouflaged with roadside grass and topsoil mixed by hand to match the lane's specific color range. The second error, the Kübelwagen's hood reflects light. Not much. Enough. The third error, he is holding a map. At 9:14, Whitmore fires once. The range is 337 meters. The wind reads 8 kilometers per hour from the southwest. A left-to-right drift of approximately 0.8 MOA that Hastings has been reading from mirage patterns in his spotting scope for the past 43 minutes. The round travels 337 meters in approximately 0.42 seconds and strikes Weiss in the upper chest. He is dead before his body completes its fall. The farmyard is absolutely silent for 4 seconds after the shot. The specific, dense silence that arrives between a muzzle crack and the understanding of what it means. Layer 1, the ground level. Weiss's driver and 2 accompanying soldiers throw themselves behind the Kübelwagen simultaneously. For the next 22 minutes, they do not move. They cannot establish the direction of the shot. They radio a report at 9:17. Officer down, sniper contact, direction unconfirmed, grid reference fermé désormais. No second shot arrives. The silence extends. One soldier, a grenadier named Fisher, later reported to an American intelligence interviewer that the silence felt deliberate, like something watching. He was correct that something was watching. Whitmore and Hastings remained in position for another 6 hours. Layer 2, the operational level. The report reaches the division's operations section at 9:31 a.m. The operations officer notes it in the log and continues routing the division's remaining armor through the corridor. He does not yet know that Weiss's death has severed the 6th Regiment's only officer qualified to integrate infantry timing with armored rearguard sequencing. He discovers this at 11:22 a.m., or when 2 SS Panzer Grenadier companies and 1 tank platoon attempt to cross the same narrow bridge simultaneously, a movement that Weiss would have sequenced and cleared in 11 minutes, and which without him produces a 3-hour traffic jam that pins the entire column in place. Allied air, Typhoons of the Royal Air Force, 2nd Tactical Air Force, find the column at 11:47 a.m. The results are recorded in German divisional casualty records as significant materiel loss, cause, air attack. The real cause chain began at 9:14 a.m., with 1 round from a man lying in a drainage culvert. Layer 3, the strategic level. The operational histories of Falaise attribute the destruction of Army Group B's withdrawal forces primarily to Allied air supremacy and artillery. This attribution is accurate and incomplete. And what it underweights is the degree to which air and artillery could find and fix German formations, because those formations had lost the command coherence to execute sequenced movement. A meaningful portion of that coherence had been systematically removed by 11 American sniper pairs operating in the corridor in the 96 hours preceding the division's main withdrawal attempt. The Totenkopf didn't lose Falaise only to bombs and shells. It lost it, in part, to men with pencils and filing systems who had spent 3 months building a map of which officer to kill next. One reversal interrupted the pattern, a reminder that even a perfected system operates within chaos. At 2:43 p.m. on August 19th, Whitmore's hide was compromised. Not by combat patrol, and not by German detection of an optical signature, by a 61-year-old French farmhand named Henri Bouchard, who walked down the lane to urinate against the stone wall and stopped 2 meters from the hide. Bouchard heard them breathing, which he later described to a French liaison officer as 2 men trying not to be heard. He did not alert the Germans, but his presence had established a location datum in the lane's cognitive map. Any German patrol now conducting a sweep would find 2 American soldiers within 4 minutes of beginning the search. Whitmore and Hastings extracted in daylight a movement doctrine classified in the training manual as reserved for absolute emergency. Crawling 240 meters through the drainage ditch with their rifles, their spotting scope, and their ledger field notes, while German traffic moved 180 meters to their north. It took 51 minutes. The drain smelled of stagnant water and clay. They emerged shaking, dehydrated, and filthy into the reverse slope of a hedgerow, where their section sergeant waited with water and, improbably, a tin of peaches. Whitmore's field notes from the extraction, preserved in the National Archives as part of a 1945 training case study, record the event in 4 words of characteristic compression. Position compromised, civilian, extracted south. He was in a new hide by 6:12 p.m. He fired twice more before dark. The forensic verdict, across the Falaise operation between August 17th and August 22nd, 1944, First Army's Sniper Intelligence Section documented 47 confirmed officer kills against German forces in the corridor, of which 11 were attributed to pairs operating specifically against Totenkopf elements. Of those 11, 8 were confirmed as SS Hauptsturmführer, or above, company and battalion commanders. The ledger identified this as the highest confirmed officer kill density per sniper pair of any engagement in First Army's operational history to that date. American sniper casualties during the operation, 0. The machine absorbed the reversal, relocated, resumed. The numbers prove something specific before they prove anything general. In the Tunisia campaign of early 1943, American officer casualty rates ran statistically equivalent to enlisted rates when adjusted for differential unit strengths, a baseline indicating that no entity was systematically targeting command elements. By the Falaise operation in August 1944, that ratio had inverted. In sectors with documented American sniper activity, German officer casualties ran at 2.8 times the rate of enlisted casualties. The statistical signature was identical to the one that had alarmed American commanders in North Africa, operating now in reverse, at American direction, against the force that had pioneered the doctrine. The enemy's own account of what this felt like cannot be improved upon by editorial description. SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Bernecker, writing in the U.S. Army's Foreign Military Studies program between 1947 and 1952, produced testimony that should be read in its bureaucratic, translated flatness precisely because the flatness is the evidence. The American Sniper Program, as we encountered it in 1944, represented a doctrinal evolution we had not anticipated. They had learned from us. They had then exceeded us. The precision with which command elements were identified and eliminated indicated a level of institutional attention to targeted killing that we would have attributed, before 1944, only to our own Scharfschützen establishment. We were wrong in that attribution. We were wrong about many things regarding the American soldier. Wrong about many things. From a Waffen-SS officer, writing an official assessment in 1947, this is not modesty. This is a forensic concession. The forgotten people who built the machine, Captain Gilbert McArdle, who borrowed a British document and built a curriculum against institutional inertia. Ralph Conover, who lost an eye teaching men to disappear, and then disappeared from the record himself. Earl Prentice, who spent the war looking at things with the precision of a professionally trained eye, and came home to a factory floor and was never asked what he'd seen. Thomas Kiefer, who built a database of the dead and was classified as a clerk. Elmer Whitmore, who dismantled organizations from 337 meters and spent 45 years surveying timberland and never told his grandchildren what he'd counted. None appear in regimental histories. McArdle's curriculum exists in the National Archives under FM 23-71 amendments, in a box requiring a specific call number. Whitmore's after-action reports are in a folder labeled, without irony, Miscellaneous Sniper Operations, Normandy Sector. Miscellaneous. The transferable principle, the one that has nothing specifically to do with rifles or France or the summer of 1944, is this: an organization that dismisses a capability because it appears small, specialist, or disproportionate to its immediate training cost will eventually face an adversary who valued that capability, developed it systematically, and deployed it against the organization's leadership at the moment of maximum vulnerability. The weapon is irrelevant. The principle is about the refusal to dismiss expertise because it doesn't resemble the existing model of what power looks like. McNair was technically correct that individual sniper engagements generated returns disproportionate to training investment if you measured one shot at a time. He was catastrophically wrong about what compound returns looked like across 400 miles of front over 2 years. Compound math at scale produces outcomes that, to those receiving them, stop looking like arithmetic. They start looking like inevitability. Like being hunted by something that understands you better than you understand yourself. Which is exactly what Werner Lindner experienced in that farmyard outside Troon, crouching behind a stone wall with 6 dead officers in his battalion, scanning tree lines and drainage ditches and ruined farmhouses, while 34 minutes of silence accumulated around him. The shooter already gone, already repositioned, already in a new hide with his field notes updated and his section sergeant's peaches eaten. Lindner survived. He was captured near the Austrian border in March 1945. In a 1946 American intelligence interview, asked to identify the most effective innovation he had encountered from American forces in France, he did not say tanks. He did not say air power. He said, "Your hidden men. We could not see them. We could not find them. We could only count what they took." Count what they took. The question Lindner couldn't answer in that farmyard, where are they, is, in a different form, still open. Because the principles that made Whitmore and Prentice and Kiefer invisible are the same principles that make any sufficiently systematic adversary invisible, until the moment they choose otherwise. And the question worth sitting with, after the ledger is closed and the fillet's dust has settled, is this: what is your organization systematically dismissing right now, and who exactly is developing it on the other side?